Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this evening's episode. I wanted to share a poetic episode. And so the idea arose, I thought about, can we as human beings honor the light that reflects off the brain? Now, of course, light doesn't reflect off the brain unless we consider the echo of that reflection to be the human subjective expressionism, but I'm not considering that. I am simply trying to share a poetic angle, that really what is going on and the challenges of human life, they are all about how light is entering the eyes of the human being. All war, all events in history they have had it's like their significance has all been in what people saw and what they did after they saw something. When it comes to light in general, I think it's important. I think many people know like what's up with light and how we see color. But if I was to share a little context about light, I would say that first of all, through evolutionary biology, it is considered that our eyes came into design where we were underwater. So first we're considered, I guess through an evolutionary perspective, to be creatures underneath the water, and then we stepped out. So the eyes were underneath water. Their development was underneath water, and the water was acting as a filter, you can say, for the first introduction of waves to some sort of cellular tissue of a creature. How we see light is that a light beam, so here's the thing, let's say there is an object, and let's say there is an object that we perceive it as, for example, yellow. That means the whole color spectrum, the whole rainbow of colors that we have, it's as if all those colors are in some sense absorbed, and only, all those colors are reflected off in the sense of what the color has absorbed. So, okay, I'm probably making this a bit confusing. What I'm trying to say is that light hits an object. Imagine when light hits an object, it has the whole color spectrum, red, green, blue, and on and so on. So when it hits the colors, when the light beam is hitting the object, in some sense the object absorbs something from the light, and it absorbs a certain color, and the colors that it reflects back are in some sense what it has not absorbed, and so I guess from a particle view, it's like when a particle reduce when the energy, it's a sort of, I don't know the right words to say it, but it's like the sun is losing energy. And that loss of energy is like the emanation of the light beams. These light beams contact objects, and light is being considered as the smallest transport energy carrier, phenomena, mechanism. And so the light hits the object, and through the lens of our eyes, it hits the back of the eye where there's a lining of cells, the retina, they call it. And there's special cells there that can pick up the primary colors of red, green, and blue. Now, light enters the eyes of man, And man's relationship with the light in his eyes is the existential simulation. So right now, as I'm talking, it is light that in some sense has illuminated, has provided a landscape for me to comment on. Now, I have to also consider that light is being stored by the human mind as a sort of memory. So a person can see something, close their eyes, and still see that phenomenology. Maybe not in present, like through a present access, but through memory. That means our memories are kind of like the reflections of light. An example would be like light from the outer realms hit an object, then it hit your eyes, and instead of beaming out of your eyes like a mirror, as it enters your eye, it reflects from the brain into the inner realms as a memory. Right? We can kind of poetically establish that relationship. So, light reflects off the brain poetically as a subject. These subjects accumulate and they become our identity. And I would say if we were able to honor the light in our eyes and in the eyes of our species, we would go towards a sort of meta-language era, a sort of reality. I mean, it's kind of very poetic. It's like even wondering about the concept of enlightenment, and really what it is the person trying to discover or trying to realize how the light in their eyes is being everything, right? Our sensory perception are like non-stop clues that we're receiving from where we are, but we can never pinpoint exactly where we are. I mean, we call it Earth in the Milky Way sector, but those are language that came from us, and the true constitution of the beyond is in some sense possibly way unfathomable to the human mind. On some level, it's funny. When I was younger, I was under the impression that people are their personalities, like how a person expressed themselves. When I was younger, I was under the impression that's what that person was. If somebody said something funny, they suddenly became the funny person. If somebody did something bad, they became the bad person. Somebody did something good, they became the good person. So in other words, it was like in my youth, I was seeing theatrics. I was seeing a theater show, a sort of self-proclaimed ideological truth, But later on, what I came to discover was that, there's a huge chance what is human is not human. Right? That means if I was to categorize all of knowledge so far, is that knowledge can be divided between what is relevant to the human being and what is irrelevant, right? For example, black holes, I consider them to be irrelevant to the human being, That means whether there is a black hole or there isn't, even though there's macrocosmic interdependence of phenomenology, but I'm saying like it's not relevant to the human idea, right? The human idea is like a torch in the darkness, and it's illuminating. It's the glow of the torch is opening a certain range of phenomenological acknowledgement, right? Right now I'm sitting on my balcony, my eyes are open, and the view from my balcony, I see all the buildings and stuff, but I can't see the other side of the building I'm in, right? So it's a limited access to perception, and what light is doing is it's giving us limited access. There are these e-cafes where people go in there to for gaming and whatnot, and in these e-cafes you pay a certain amount and you have a certain time to be there. So let's say you pay for 2 hours, and for 2 hours you have access to all the games, all the software, and the applications of the computer, But the moment the time finishes, the thing automatically logs out. And what I feel is going on is that we are logging into, when we wake up in the day, we're logging into a universe that is really primarily generated by the relationship of light and sound, right? Our personalities, they move through sound. We communicate, we talk, we share our eyes, But when it comes to existence, it is the movement of light, so it's as if I personally don't have kids, but if I did, I'd be like, hey kids, the universe is made of light and sound, pay attention to that, and so this light and sound echoes deeply. I have had people say words to me that when I was younger this would happen, when somebody would say something degrading, or belittling to me, and it would be like weeks. For weeks it was in my mind, as if, why did the person say that, from what angle did they say that, but until I realize I am not a creature of language, then philosophy becomes valuable. If you're a creature of language, you don't really care for philosophy, because the world has already been filled out for you. Of course it's easy to believe in an ideology being the absolute. Human beings from the beginning of time have been making things absolute. Before the religions, people don't know this, there was pantheism. There was druidry. There were human beings who they had no metaphysical system. They were just living alongside nature. Nature was God to them, But then the monotheistic era came into place. And when the monotheistic era came into place, human beings were tackling, in some sense, there was a sort of existential battle. It was a sort of existential meaning at war. And what that means is people were like, yo, is truth the object in front of me, or is truth beyond an object, right? Because when a person reads I would say texts from the 6th century and the Abrahamic traditions, you see one key thing in all these religions, that they are trying to make an emphasis that God is an inconceivable singularity. Now, I don't know if many people know how even the human idea of metaphysics came about, right? Of course, there's an experiential component to how things have, how their meaning arise, but there's also an ideological component. So ideologically, it starts with Aristotle. And Aristotle, he writes this treatise on physics, right? And then he writes another book called Metaphysics, and meta means after. So Aristotle, in his universe of conception, reached a point where he's like, yeah, okay, this is how the physics works, but what about that which is after the physics? What about the gods that we are in ancient Greece worshipping and walking on clouds, right? So Aristotle had to, in some sense, ponder on these questions, and he was not alone. And there were ancient Greece was like a landing zone for very, very conscious beings. So metaphysics was the title of a book, of a second book that Aristotle wrote, but it was such a significant and important angle of reality that it became its own branch. And currently I would tell you how in educational systems they teach metaphysics. First of all, it is a branch of philosophy. It's a branch of philosophy. Now this, imagine a tree. Imagine philosophy is a giant tree and one of its branches is metaphysics. Now that branch divides into two types of metaphysics generally. Okay, so there's a general metaphysics and then there's a special metaphysics, right? So general metaphysics, they call that ontology. Pretty much we're trying to figure out how we're being here, what is being the truth. But I would say special metaphysics, it goes into three branches, right? And of course I would say my awareness to these three branches are through my own way. I'm pretty much somebody who's like climbing the mountain with ropes he's making, it's like, it's like I'm building the rope that I need to climb, while I'm climbing on another rock. But what those three branches, so just imagine this, so we went from philosophy being the trunk, imagine, first branch, we go to one branch called metaphysics. This metaphysics actually divides into two branches, general and special, and then the special divides into three branches, right? And the three branches of the special, if I remember correctly, oh my god. So the three branches, one of them was, if I remember correctly, was rational psychology. We were having a relationship of the conscious mind with calculation and order. Then there is natural theology, how people are trying to wonder about, I would say, divine interference in nature, or the relationship of a divine idea being able to map a natural one, And there was one more that escapes me. There's one that escapes me. It's three branches. Cosmology. There we go, I remembered. Cosmology. So how the cosmic, how the macro is set. So we're looking at macro and then the two types of micro, I would say. Or actually it could be macro, micro, for all of them can apply, but cosmology is pretty much we're wondering about the universal position, right, and how it could actually be hold a transcendentalism beyond the language, beyond an object-subject relationship. And really this contribution was of the division of metaphysics into general and special was from the continental philosophers. People don't know how valuable they were. People think that a philosopher is just, there's only one kind of philosophers, just like how we have in, for example, monotheistic religions. I'll give you an example. For example, Islam has two denominations, its religion, primarily from its ancient times. There's, for example, the Sunni, and then there's the Shia, which pretty much these two denominations of the Islamic movement. One is following, the comrades of the Prophet, and the other is following the relatives of the Prophet, the family, blood-related relatives. So the Muslims you find, for example, in Iran, they are Shia-oriented. The Muslims you find in Saudi Arabia, they are Sunni-oriented, right? So it's two different types of the same kind of thing. And so for philosophy, there was the analytical philosopher and there was the continental philosopher. The analytical philosopher was way more convinced by objective realism. That means it's like reality for the, I will give you a simple explanation. The analytical philosopher saw an object in the room first, then a subject. The continental philosopher noticed how there could be a subject in the room before an object, and if a subject is in the room before an object, the reality is unknown first, then knowledge is being overlaid on it. But if we take the analytical approach, reality is known, then the unknown is being overlaid on it, right? So primarily this is how I would say the ideological systems of human beings is designed. We look at reality as a sort of cause and effect. And this cause and effect, if the causal position is unknown, we are saying the effect is known. If the causal position is known, we're saying the effect is unknown. And ultimately reality is like a wave. It keeps going up and down. Right now I would say reality is going through a phase where, or I would poetically say the earth is going through a phase where it is individualized into species, but you can say poetically that there are states where there is no individualism, right? So the unknown has a possibility in being empty, it has a possibility in being singular, it has the possibility of being dual as we have access to, or it has the possibility of being infinite. Now, in some sense, all of these have a sort of relevance. It's as if these are all dimensions to the one great event of life. By the way, dear listeners, questions are welcomed. You know, these live streams happen once in a lifetime, pretty much. You know, then I go into the other videos. So if people have questions that arise as I speak, feel free to, you know, ask your question. You know, sometimes, you know, philosophy is not looking for answers, but it's looking for great questions. You know, sometimes I feel the difference between the scientist and the philosopher. You know, the philosopher can, in some sense, cannot accept any question, and the scientist cannot accept any answer. So, in the subtitle, I've also written Poetic Findings of Unconditional Sight. This one's a bit difficult to talk about because I usually talk about it in the sense that there's a language threshold. That means right now, as I'm trying to poetically penetrate the secrets of this universal sector, you know, what is taking place is that I am looking. So that means before there is meaning for a personality or an identity, there is just sight and existence. That means this is the simplest thing that any human being can notice. This is pretty much the basic meditation you do, where you try to figure out how your attention is being your existence and how your existence is being your attention. And once you find an unconditional relationship in this, there is this notion that the person is enlightened, not in the sense that they are special, in the sense that they have understood how the universe is moving, right? So it's as if the universe was in existence before we were, and we opened our eyes in the universe, and so it's as if the universe is our sensei, the whole universe, you know? And so what we do is that we honor eyes, you know. This is the simplest thing that I do this anytime I feel a sort of existential panic attack or an anguish. Like when I say anguish, that means an inevitable possibility that is realer than, you know, than an, you know, inevitable impossibility. Sometimes in life I think about, all right, there's going to be so many human beings born on this planet. There's nothing to be afraid of. We just have to, in some sense, cultivate a great playground for the future eyes, right? That means imagine geniuses are going to be incarnating on this earth. Imagine like a million geniuses are about to be born on this earth. Now we, as the ones who have entered the earth first, are trying to create that great workstation for the human species, right? Because we all value work, yet we don't value who is working. Because if we were to value who is working, we would have to go on an existential search. You know, this is what I wished I would have asked my professors in university, which I didn't, you know, at the time. You know, and that was in some sense, what is the identity? That means, what is a person? We understand it's a physical thing, but subjectively, can it be one thing? That means, how many ideas have we lived through until now? I mean, when I think about my childhood until now, like, oh my God, how many different senses of self I have looked at this world, you know? And it's mind-boggling, you know? It's mind-boggling how we are an endless reanimation of selfhood. That means not only are we incarnating it not only is the periodic table reincarnating, but the genetical patterns relationship with behaviorism is also incarnating. Honor is, of course, something arbitrary, but it is something, it's for, like, honor can be said how an inner realm evaluation is more important than an outer realm, evaluation. In an outer realms, the person can be dishonored. It's like a person could be eating ice cream and somebody could come and slap that ice cream out of their hand. That could be a sort of dishonor, right? And so the species, because we are, we kind of don't have a choice, but because our genetical, like the animal, the biological animal is a reactive animal. Things happen in its environment and it reacts to it, and that reaction becomes its memories, and those memories become the sort of alphabet where the words of the identity kind of animate. So when I'm giving these talks, it's like I cannot ignore my memory. I want to read for the audience a quote from Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela says, "Honor belongs to those who never forsake the truth, even when things seem dark and grim, who try over and over again, who are never discouraged by insults, humiliation, and even defeat." That is an incredible thing Nelson Mandela is saying. There are people like this on this planet. For example, I have a twin brother, and I would say that when I look at my life until now, my twin brother has had more of a ability to stay true, to his truth than compared to me. When I look at my life, there I was like, I was kind of being like, how that scene in the Avengers where Hulk, grabs Loki, and Loki's like, "I'm a god, you brute animal," or something like that, and then Hulk suddenly smashes Loki to the walls. So in my youth, I felt it was as if, what it was as if I was a weak program. In my youth, I was a weak program. That means it was as if I hadn't found the context of the world I trusted, so any concept could have changed my context. And I was privileged in this lifetime because I learned from my twin brother that there are some moments in life that if you stand your ground, the karmic reward is so much more than if you, in some sense, let yourself be shaken. This doesn't mean being a sort of, proud juggernaut, or a person who they just throw away their emotions and they become a machine in this life. And I don't mean like that. I mean in the sense that truth is the greatest possibility of energy. And you can say a moment where the cause and effect are the same. I'll say it's like we have this chronological view of cause and effect, right, in time, where you cause something, it has an effect, then that effect causes something, and then that has an effect, and it just echoes, right? So when I look at cause and effect, there has to be a moment, right, where the cause before it turned into an effect, there was no telling what was a cause and what was an effect. Kind of like when a caterpillar in a cocoon is becoming a butterfly, all the cells of the caterpillar die, and it's like all the causal energy transforms from its potential to an effect of a kinetic energy, for example, right? So it's as if all the cells of the caterpillar die. The last cell of the caterpillar, before it dies, becomes the butterfly, you know? You know, just to have declared this on this earth, the caterpillar is the closest metaphor, closest creature that comes to a phoenix. You know, even I would say a caterpillar is more advanced than a phoenix. You look at human beings, 4.5 billion years for this monkey to learn to stand, you know, and speak, right? But you look at the caterpillar is like, hey, human beings, hey, advanced chimps, watch this. And the caterpillar goes into a cocoon, and in a very short time period comes out as a completely different entity. That means when I look at the caterpillar, I'm like, no way, a creature designed to be on land transformed to be designed to be in the air, right? Caterpillars are just alien technology to me. I mean, like, it doesn't get more alien than a caterpillar, right? The transformation period, you know. And butterflies, I remember, like, anytime I see a butterfly, it's kind of like a divine sign. Why? Because it is gentle. The gentleness of life somehow has a divine connotation to it, and I often think why, and I realize because it doesn't have complex overlays of stories of suffering through identity. And I feel there is a transformation from like this butterfly state to a caterpillar state for human beings. I honestly am telling you, we are like the only species on this planet that took its head out of water and noticed land. And what I mean is that we noticed ourselves in the void, and all other species are just going on with their biological instinctual program. You know, as if nature is saying, go forth, and all the species are just going forth. And for a second, the human being managed to stop and be like, what am I hearing? You know? Our minds are the butterfly state. When you live as a mind, I will tell you, you appreciate rhythm. You know, that means no one in a battle can suddenly start, you know, tapping their foot on the ground and hearing a music beat, you know. Maybe like war drums had an effect, but like, but I'm telling you, it's like rhythm requires gentleness. It requires stillness. You know, and people fear stillness and silence, and that's how you know society is ignorant. That's the only reason, you know. Because when you look at chaos and order, if you treat them as both citizens of the advanced civilization in the future, you'd be like, oh man, you can't blame the chaotic people. They have a chaotic context of life. You can't blame the ordered people. They have an ordered context of life, right? That means it's as if usually people who are vicious, or in educational systems in the West, there's this huge thing about bullying. It's all about reality exposure. A child is born into a world, and what does that child do? Like a sponge, take in information. Now let's say there's a child in the educational system where this child goes home and the parents hit it. You know, kind of sort of domestic abuse, but the parents don't care. The parents are old school. The child's like, oh my God, you know, am I you know, part of an immigrant family right now? And so imagine the person got abused and was introduced. Like, I'll give you an example. Well, my parents, of course, were angels. But one of my cousins and one of my uncles, who's like this very educated man, you know, very, you know, smart person, right? But a person who has no moral compass. That means sometimes you can be a genius without morality. You know, Frankenstein was a genius, but it was immoral what he was doing, right? So one of my uncles, you know, there's this story about one of my cousins who's much older than me. You know, I heard this story later on, but I'll share it with the audience, you know. And because I have a lot of uncles, you know, nobody will ever know which uncle this is. But I'll tell you this, that one of my uncles evidently had gone to Belgium. And when he had gone to Belgium, you know, he had gone on a very strict kind of immigration status, as if he had no choice. He was like, you know, leaving a country for good, you know. And so when he goes to Belgium, he has financial problem, and my grandfather goes to see my uncle in Belgium, right? And my grandpa goes there, and he goes there to also see his grandson, right? But he goes and sees that the grandson, you know, my cousin, is not there with my uncle and his wife, right? So my grandpa gets angry, and he's like, "Where's my grandson?" You know. This is like a, you know, an Iranian religious man, you can say, my grandpa, you know, industrial-oriented man, you know. And so my grandpa gets angry and says to my uncle, "Where's your son?" You know, and he says, "We put him in this foster care." Right? And my grandpa gets so angry, like, WTF, is this the son I raised? You know? And what he does is he goes to that daycare, not daycare, kind of like, I don't know, foster care, where my uncle left his own son. And he goes there, and my cousin was so young, maybe like 7 years old, you know, and he had only seen my grandpa like maybe once or twice, but he was in such a scary place for a young child's mind that the moment he sees my, you know, grandfather walk into that kind of like foster care area or whatever, he quickly runs to my grandfather, and my grandfather brings, you know, my cousin home to my uncle and scolds my uncle, you know. It's like, are you a human being, or are you like, what are you? You know? And it was very intense, right? It was a very kind of, I don't know how to tell you. Sometimes in life, you can't ignore chaos. It's just there. It's like the light and the shadow are simultaneous. It's just you have a choice to in some sense go towards an area where it's either brighter in experience or it is dimmer in experience. When we honor the light in our eyes, it means we treat every other human being as an explorer, and when they speak, we're like, okay, what has this explorer figured out, you know? And so really it's a giant exploration, you know. The issue with civilization is that because we have stopped exploring, and because we have thought knowledge is just a fixed story, it's as if like the journey of our eyes has stopped in our habitual biological, I would say, desire. That means desires are stealing away the human multidimensional life. We are at a war with, in some sense, the void. And I would say not a war where it's like, you know, there was this Greek emperor who got pissed off at Poseidon, and he ordered his army to take swords and attack the ocean. Can you imagine like being a general and being like, soldiers, the king has ordered us to literally attack the ocean. So I don't know what that means, just, you know, with your swords hit the water, you know, and the soldiers are like, yes sir, for the empire, you know. And the soldiers run into the ocean with swords trying to defeat water, and the ocean's like, what, are you serious? You know? You know, sometimes I think, you know, that even I am not devoid of chaotic dimensions. There are moments where I think about chaos, and I think of chaos as an amplification. And what that means is like 8 billion human beings in this giant system going forth in the space-time continuum. They are each inputting meaning, right? Based on how what light enters our eyes and how sound enters our ear, we respond to the world. Now these 8 billion input points, let's say points of input into the system, right, eventually will realize that they are not the information, right? And we are in an information age, so what I'm saying is going to sound bizarre to people, you know, because we are all like dying to find information. People invest in technology just to get access to information, right? People buy bigger TVs, you know, like one of my neighbors right now, like half his wall is like a TV. I don't know like how he's doing, you know. You know, it's as if we want to live inside of our imaginations, and technology and the marketed, you know, society and cultural programs are like giving us that promise. You know what culture is? Culture is a way to put nature into a box and give it the illusion of immortality when nature's consciousness has been dispensed with. One may ask a good question, you know, I'm thinking if I was to ask myself a question about this episode, I would say, what kind of honor will we find in the future? I would say, the honor we will find in the future is realizing that the brain presents a landscape of probabilities, just presents a spectrum of probabilities, and the conscience and the intuition hierarchize these probabilities, you know. That's really what it is. The mind is simulating, it's like throwing multiple simulations, you know, layers upon the moment, you know. So just like we write on a piece of paper, the brain is animating personality. This personality is an identity separate from the world. The moment it is separate from the world, it can have endless relationships with the world. These endless relationships with the world are free will. So you can say hilariously, free will is when a part of nature separates from all of it in order to be able to establish any kind of relationship with it, you know? From the perspective of a singular being, yeah, it's freaky being a human being because you're alive once and you die. But from the perspective of a multidimensional being, you're like, okay, let me see how I allocate the simulations of my mind into, you know, a sort of format, or not a format, but a sort of realism. I don't know how to say it. It's like even when I come to give these talks, there is something moving before the voice arrives, you know, into the microphone, before the voice enters the microphone. You know, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we talk about the earliest physiological need being shelter, right? I mean, temperature is another thing, but like shelter, right? And I would say in the mind, shelters itself in stories. It has no choice. Stories are the bunkers for the multidimensional attention to dwell in as an individual. So if we can honor the body of the species, which means the physical, all the physical relationships of human beings with the universal sector, then if we can honor the mind of the human species, which means all the ways objects are becoming subjects, if we can honor subjectively, this is something so complicated that I don't know how the species is going to do it, but I don't know, maybe something happens that we realize we don't need to be locked into thoughts, that there is a strange freedom when man actually tries to find the effortless state. Just think about what I'm saying to you here. An effortless state means a state where there is no input. If your mind was a keyboard, there isn't a single key being pressed, and you're just staring at the keyboard. And when you stare at the keyboard, you're staring at an ability for infinity to express in the void. We are the permission of a universe to be an individual. You know, some days I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, really, universe? You want me to exist today? You know what I mean? So, Yusuf asks an interesting question. He says, how can you speak without paying attention to your voice, or vice versa when you listen to other individuals? Okay, interesting question. So, two questions. Let's first answer the first one. How can you speak without paying attention to your voice? First of all, attention is not a laser beam, even though it can appear that way in concentration. Attention is space. So right now, when I'm like, look at myself and I'm like, okay, how am I paying attention to this moment? There is no individual part of the moment. It's as if I am a space called awareness, and phenomena is there, and some part of the landscape is controllable, which I identify as my body. And when a person speaks, like for example, when I speak, my ears cannot avoid the sound I generate. So the moment I speak, I hear my thoughts through my own voice, right? But what's fascinating is that behind my eyes and ears, I don't hear a sound. I don't hear my own voice when I think. If I could say that. That means in my inner realms, when thoughts move, they are not personified. Which is another way of saying, behind my eyes, I am not a person, I am a presence of an intelligent space. In front of my eyes, I am, the personality of a specific object in that space, controllable, right? And when we listen to others, it's just like reading. It's like we're reading with our ears instead of reading with our eyes. The language that is communicated creates an image. That image becomes a film. If that film goes forth, then the person understands what another is saying. So to me, it's like there is this slow, excuse my language, but the slow-ass way the educational system is teaching people only through the structure of language, and there's a way that we could have always thought, and we have been, which is through images. That means there's some people who want to read books, and there's some people who want to read films. Not read films. They want to find the films that are the closest to reality, So if you can read a book and realize behind your eyes it's a film, and if you listen to someone and realize behind your eyes it's a film, and realize the content of that film is generated by you, that means any person who, let's say, my talks help, you are actually helping yourself, I am just sound in the void, but it is your mind that is calculating, that is articulating the sound, right, and animating it. So in some sense, it's kind of strange use, if I would say, your voice is in your attention before you even pay attention to it. And also a way that I often, like I've noticed that the way I speak in these talks, because I hear my voice, the moment I say it, it's as if you know what to say, and then you say it, and from the moment you said it, you have all that time to think about, in some sense, the next sentence to say. So it's just feedback, and if you know that you are alive, it's as if if you honor your attention, you honor the presence of your just life, you will notice your abilities come to the surface of this, at least this lifetime. There are times I would say, intuitively done things that I've known they were for other parallel dimensions of my own existence. That means I am not just speaking to others, I am also speaking to my own greater future self, which inevitably for all human beings will be the same moment. So we are ontologically all one moment of intelligence. And little did the creature in time know that beyond time it is not a creature. We don't even have the language for it. That means people shouldn't make language into the ultimate, or they will live in a small world. And so anyways, Yusuf, I hope what I shared contributed to your question. There's usually two sources of verification. One source of verification is direct experience. Another source of verification is using an idea that has arose from another's direct experience, and as you implement it and try it out, your direct experience recalibrates that idea. If we can honor an unknown multidimensionality within all of us, I will tell you, our civilization will stop war, because it will realize, why are we fighting when intelligence has an opportunity that it has practiced, trained 4.5 billion years for? In my opinion, it's not that we evolved 4.5 billion years just to build advanced civilization. It's as if it's as if the advanced civilization is already built, and human beings need to internally find it and externalize it. When it comes to metaphysics, how you honor the metaphysical is by understanding the physical. This is why science is very valuable when it comes to understanding information. And life is information. I called it in one episode life formation. It's like more life formation below. I don't know, guys. I'll be honest. I've been giving these talks for a while, and I have been staring at the language, beyond the language threshold, and pretty much from the scope of my exploration into human knowledge, I have just come to the conclusion that it's a room. That reality is like a bunch of rooms, and we are in one room of a cosmic mansion, this huge cosmic structure. We find ourselves like on one part of it. And the cool thing is, because it's too dark to see anything, our inner realms have a chance to build. Because imagine if we just knew everything, if we saw the edge of the universe right now, we'd be like, oh my god, there's nothing else left to do. It's like, if we knew everything, there would be no reason to be an individual. Without the unknown, the ego cannot exist, and this is why both good and evil, before they leave Earth, they will in some sense protect the unknown. The unknown surpasses it, the unknown is like how Jon Snow in Game of Thrones went beyond the Night's Watch, went beyond the wall, right? That's the unknown. And that wall for every person is perception. There's a person named Aldous Huxley. What does he say? He says there are things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. That means we are inside a revolving door of perception between the known and the unknown, known and the unknown, known and the unknown. You wake up to a world of action, then you close your eyes to a world of being. Then you wake up to a world of action, close your eyes to a world of being, and eventually you will realize everything is being regardless of what you do. But when you do some things, what can be expands, right? So in some sense, the purpose of existence is to experience reality, and the purpose of experience is to exist in reality, right? And it's like the codependence of the mind. I'll show people a picture about light. And this is so important because from an evolutionary biological perspective, science, is something that is very honorable in the sense that the evolutionary biologist has to be like, oh my God, do I have to explain to people how we see 3 dimensions, And the whole world is like, yeah, you do, And so I'm going to share with you a picture of how our brain works and the miracle of symmetry that we find in our genetics. So if people look at the wallpaper of this talk, you will see this picture I'm putting there. All right, there we go. Hopefully, guys, one day there would be a, a grand stage. I am kind of explaining this stuff on a whiteboard on. But anyways, so this is very important. I'll just read it. Right, so there is kind of like three angles that lead to our perception of three-dimensional space, three views to consider. What it is each eyeball is actually recording a two-dimensional framework. You can imagine like in a triangular way, and it's as if when these two dimensions, you know what it is? It's actually, I think, a sort of right angle perception. So here it says the individual image, due to the positioning of our eyes, when objects are closer than about 18 feet away, each eye sees a slightly different angle. Combined image, the incoming signals from both eyes are compared in the brain, and the subtle differences are used to create a three-dimensional image. And the last component says, try it for yourself by holding your hand in front of your face and closing one eye at a time. It is easy to see the different 2D views perceived by each eye. And guys, this is really true because I used to play soccer, and this is a very old fact, believe it or not, and I would close one of my eyes and I would kick the soccer ball, and the aim would be completely off, right? So it's like we need a sort of symmetrical, biological conditioning to be able to perceive things accordingly. This reality is too strange in the sense of how geometric it is. Just the geometry of the realm is the biggest suggestion that there's divinity in the world. Because creaturehood is a mystery. Don't let anyone make you think creaturehood is not a mystery. Anytime there's an explorer, there's always someone who's like, yo man, who cares about exploring the world? We're just here once, let's enjoy. What that joy is meaningless if there's greater dimensions and we're just sitting here, trying to, not litter. That's gonna save the world, Really what's gonna save the world is universal responsibility through universal identity. That means what is the fastest way, the fastest route in the space-time continuum to an advanced civilization for the local entity to, in some sense, realize a non-local possibility. What that means is every hero, every villain in this world of ours for a second stops what they're doing and they're like, wait a minute, something beyond duality, Mr. Within, are you serious? And I'll be like, We can say even geometry belongs to duality. I mean, look at it, you know, just look at the biological body, it's too symmetrical. We have a left, brain hemisphere, a right brain hemisphere, and then we have one brain that is both of them, that which is remarkable. That's if there's two types of self, but they're actually simulations of the same moment. The greatness of the realm calls to all those who can in some sense respond to it. It's as if if every human being was a battery, what should these batteries power up? To conclude this episode, we honor the light that reflects off the brain. Poetically, we honor the inner realms of every individual. That means human beings start realizing everyone has an inner life and an outer life. The inner life is invisible, the outer life is visible. If the person communicates, others can access their inner life. If the person doesn't communicate, others cannot access their inner life. There's also that when a person communicates, what is the accuracy of their communication? And this means that communication can be artificial and communication can also be real. Right? But ultimately, communication is image sharing. That means back in the day, what our bodies did in regards to hunter-gatherer tribes, somebody would find berries, or somebody would find like some sort of like rare thing, and they would bring it to the tribe and be like, "Yo, everybody, I found berries. Our world, our lives are changed. Or it's like a new taste, like a psychedelic experience has arrived." And the whole tribe started eating berries, imagine, right? But the tribe was a hunter-gatherer. Now I feel the same thing is happening, but for the mind. And the mind is a hunter-gatherer in the sense of where it's trying to hunt and gather from the inner realms and bring to the outer realms, to the one tribe. That means we have reached a point where it's as if we are also exploring the inner world, and we're like, hey, humanity, there's memory, there's imagination, there's so much more, and it's like, the winds of evolution go for it. Dear listeners, nobody knows ultimately what is going on. This means we're each temporary strategies, and the uniqueness of our DNA is a contribution to the realm. The advanced civilization has not emerged, meaning that I am speaking right now inside Civilization 1.0. There will be children in the future who will never know what Civilization 1.0 was like. But now, all those people listening to me, you will know what Civilization 1.0 was like. Now, Civilization 1.0 was built in regards to a strong attraction towards honoring our past and where we come from, right? A person's pride is where they began in life, really. And if you're smart, anything can in some sense become part of your value in this life. It's like a person being kind to another in some sense has been kind to the realm, Civilization 2.0 is at the planting stage, and what that means is we are all pioneers at the pioneer stage of the next great movement of civilization, which includes a renaissance of minds. I have perceived this, and I'm just putting the prediction out there. We've had individual renaissances in certain parts of the world take place, but in regards to a collective renaissance, a renaissance of a global nature of every person's inner realms contributing to the most advanced outer realm, like that is unseen. You know, that is something that if we do, we will create the new legend. The legend of creatures that got bored of their past, and so they use the present to, in some sense, build the future. You know, the future has a bad rap, you know, because we're like, oh man, why should I think about the future? The future, oh man, extinction, that's a bummer. Yeah. The 99.9% of species go extinct, and the reason we say 99.9 because we are that 1% that hasn't gone extinct yet, you know. The poet Hafez, this man from 700 years ago, has a quote which left such an incredible impression on me. He says, "One regret, dear world, I wish not to have on my deathbed is that I did not kiss you enough." And what that means is, in some sense, one regret, dear world, I had experienced. I did not see you. You know, when you were here, you know, imagine you have animated after eons to come to visit an old friend. Imagine you as a person, you're not even here to build an advanced civilization, you're just here to come and to, in some sense, be a friend to the guy in mind. When we honor the nature of reality, we are honoring the source of life. And all philosophies filtered or categorized through a cause and effect outline, really what can happen is, there's only a universe of cause, there never was an effect. There's only a universe of an effect, and the cause can never be known. The cause and effect are simultaneous. Or in some sense, there is something beyond cause and effect taking place. We have to honor our future if we want it to stand, you know, better than us. You know, that's something I think everybody deep down, they've rationalized, and they want the future to be better than the past, right? Yet we haven't personalized it, and that's where I would say the calling of an advanced civilization takes place. And I feel every species, intelligent species on rocks in the middle of nowhere in the space-time continuum, they all come to a point where they're like, why are we individuals? And then there is a unity. And in that unity, the inner realms, in some sense, cooperate enough for the greatest ideas to be, in some sense, accessed, right? So we are each like 8 billion universes, and because of our DNA being different, that means there's 8 billion different universes, different types of Earths in people's mind, right? In people's minds. So the responsibility is to utilize this information, and the only way it can be utilized if the human being, excuse my language, gives a shit about, in some sense, humanity. You know, that means violence is the act of an inferior species. What do we find animals do? They're violent by nature. Why? Because they don't care, right? When our consciousness and our evolutionary mind allows us to care. You know, I would like to read an essay for the listeners from this unpublished work of mine called The Source of Language. By the way, an update. Just a second, guys. I'm trying to find the PDF. Can you imagine being a time traveler going to the past and explaining a PDF to like tribal people? You know what a PDF is? Yeah? All right, let's see what random essay I'm gonna read. Okay, so this chapter is called Playfully Handle the Ego and Sincerely. There's 3 quotes I've selected in front of this chapter. One quote is from Hafez. He says, "Be kind to your sleeping heart. Take it out into the vast fields of light and let it breathe." Alan Watts says this is the real secret of life, to be completely engaged with what you are doing in the here and now, and instead of calling it work, realize it is play. And finally, the quote from Sri Ramana Maharshi, "That which comes and goes, rises and sets, is born and dies is the ego. That which always abides, never changes, and is devoid of qualities is the self." So I'm going to read this essay called Playfully Handle the Ego and Sincerely from The Source of Language, something I wrote in 2015. Just for our archival information's sake. There's 2 live viewers right now, and in my inner realms, I'm just going to imagine 2 million, All right. So here it is. Playfully handle the ego and sincerely focus on your true nature, and activate such a beautiful self-remembrance that the dawn of mankind shines brighter than blind logic. Ask yourself, in quotations, how is the self being the self? And observe the beauty of the presence of the origin of your thought beyond void personalities. It is very simple. Where was I? It is very simple. What is the source of thought when the source of language is beyond thought? Could this just be a scribbly book in your hand? What is it, that awareness? What is that awareness within that has projected all externality as this moment? There is no secret when you are the receiver of the world of your origin. To just study the world, but also study how you are being the world, is the difference between an innate unified vision and a violent illusion. Perceive until you are all perception, both empty and full, with smiling yin-yang symbols. A violent man still plays with dinosaurs. What all this comes down to is to be yourself by becoming aware of the self, by doing nothing, to see that you're already being the awareness of everything, then to remember what must be done like a broken clock at the end of time. The journeys outside are temporal, the journey within is eternal. Flow is one with the wisdom of your world. Love opens all worlds. Enlightenment is beyond strategies. Speak through the devotion and just observe. Yeah, what else can we do? It's like, how was life? It was a giant observance, you know? It's like, what is suffering? It's like, there's no suffering, it's just observance, you know, sensory observance. Anyways, thanks for listening. I would conclude the episode by saying we just need to honor the multidimensional possibility of intelligence. If it's multidimensional, that means we can't really judge anyone or anything, because as long as there's new modalities of vision and they look at something, it can have a new dimension, right? So because something has multiple angles, we just honor the light in our eyes and all that it's doing through a multidimensional context. And really the poetic findings of an unconditional sight is that if there is unconditional sight, it means there is no seer. That means it is an identityless state. So if there's a state where there is no identity, sight has no owner. So imagine sight is nature. And because we have access to it, we are nature's intelligence. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll be on Discord for those interested, and thanks. Namaste. And advanced civilization awaits.